Abhi Yadav is the founder and CTO of Zylotech, a company focused on AI-driven analytics that businesses can use to help efficiently retain customers and reduce churn. On this episode of IT Visionaries, Abhi explains what all of that means, and he dives into how the field of machine learning will continue to grow. Enjoy this episode. This podcast is brought to you by Salesforce. Did you know that Salesforce isn't just for sales? Using Salesforce as an employee experience platform helps make every employee across your organization more productive thanks to a common, mobile-first platform for getting work done faster. Find out more at salesforce.com/employee experience.
Welcome to another episode of IT Visionaries. I'm Ian Faison, Chief Content Officer here at Mission.org. And on the other line, Abhi, how's it going?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show. We are really excited to talk all things AI. We're going to talk about automated machine learning, and we're going to get into your background a little bit. First, how did you get started in technology?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I grew up in India, and as you can imagine, India had a kind of pseudo Silicon Valley, and I grew up in that city. Did my early schooling in Bangalore, so I was super excited. Like listening to, and my family has been more from the defense, so I grew up in a military base. But then I was in Bangalore, and then this world drew me a lot of attention in terms of like, what does it happen? What these, hundreds of people in Microsoft working out in these big, large, fancy glass buildings. So I was always curious about that, and kind of hanging out with some engineers. I ended up choosing computer science in my undergrad, and that blew me away, and how magic happens. And when I came to US in late 90s, I realized the importance of storytelling more than just coding, which means that the 50% of the battle is really articulating the problem. And I somehow felt that it's not just a bunch of codes, but it's a whole process. It's a whole machinery, which works all the way from identifying problems, how that can be solved. There was no fancy word like design thinking and things like that, but the whole ingredients of all of that, with respect to how you start from, a problem, defining it, articulating it, and then solving it with a combination of not just tech, tools, people, process, a whole bunch of things, is an amazing feeling, and gives me an instant sort of thumbs up that maybe technology is where I'm going to play my sort of wits. It's all about building stuff. So I'm like doing construction building, let's do software building. So I'm sorry for my long answer, but that's what I felt.
Yeah, no worries. I love to hear how folks got started and everything. So flash forward to Zylotech. What was the reason that you saw some white space and started building the company?
So Zylotech is my second startup, and my background is I'd work with, General Electric, again in the customer analytics area and financial services and things like that. And then this was also a time when the relational data was moving into this whole big data noise. And that kind of blew me away as both an engineer as well as with my product background, startup background. I thought this would be really cool because all this while we have never seen, an easy and faster way of getting customer data, the raw form. They're all getting unified. They're all getting sort of collected, and you get the insight, which maybe a business user need or marketing needs. And it's all about that kind of pipe, or just from raw data to all the way to sort of actionable insight. It'll be meaningful. And being a data scientist background myself with a little bit of depth understanding and with customer analytics, product building experience, I thought the only reason we've not been able to do this because this whole data engineering was very slow And no matter what a data scientist could do, the magic and everything, it all turns out to be, bad data or messy one. And then you need engineering dependencies, and then there's big data, but you got to move together with a sort of data engineering mindset, but you being a data scientist. It was an interesting problem. So we thought, how about we build custom analytics in a box, which not just help you unify data, find you the right data, do the appropriate feature engineering, could be automated feature engineering. And this could be, in those days, people started talking about a lot of ETL pie. We thought, if we could somehow bring custom analytics in a box with a smart data and decision pipe, which is constantly coming up and self-evolving, working out, and kind of closing the loop sort of a thing, that will be so cool. So yeah, this was instantaneously a sort of a lab project. So post-graduating with my MBA, I did work with the CSAIL lab and, work with really smart postdoc, PhD, had a lot of labs within MIT. So it was really blown up at how this could be done, given my domain expertise and knowledge about some of those things. And we started as a sort of a consulting project, academic project. And then over the period of time, we built this enterprise grade product. So a little bit longer, but the natural evolution of Zylotech.
And why the name Zylotech? I've been curious.
Yeah, no, it's a little funny story. We actually was called earlier as Data Zylo, which goes back to the story I just talked about. Data Zylo is like, we found some Greek variants of Zylo with the XYLO. So it was Data Zylo, which means the data which moves really fast in a wooden hollow, which is kind of really fast, in terms of insight. So that was the logic, and it's really hard to get company names these days with especially data as a prefix suffix. So we started with that, but then we never, secure trademarks and other things with Data Zylo. And some point in time, a lawyer suggested, hey guys, you got to get rid of data somehow, and probably going to make it more meaningful. So by the time we had released what I did customer, and then we thought, how about still maintain the Zylo, but instead of X, we kind of made it at Z because a lot of people were writing us as Z. So we took it as user feedback, and we just ended up getting Zylotech. So yeah, that's why we're Zylotech now. Pretty excited about that.
Yeah, that's great. And you have a ton of involvement in the MIT startup labs kind of world. Was that something that has kind of like inspired you over the past few years as you were building the company, before the company, being involved in that way? And you went to MIT, you got your MBA at MIT, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So what's that kind of culture like? I know a lot of folks that we have on the show are kind of in and around Silicon Valley, but not as much kind of on the MIT labs, side of the country. And there's just so much innovation that's happening there. I'm curious kind of why you wanted to build the company on the East Coast and kind of your connection to MIT.
Yeah, no, I'd lived on both East and West Coast, and my previous company was West Coast based. But, I realized MIT is such an interesting place, and I'm not the first guy saying that, but it was pretty exciting experience, very refreshing. So everyone thinks very uniquely, differently, which was very complimentary, because coming from a real world experience definitely helped. So I met really interesting people who've been looking up some core infrastructure problems and core build-up. But I realized that there's a lot of talent actually in and around MIT, but also Cambridge and the whole machine learning space, and which was instant hit or sort of thing. And I definitely want to get involved with MIT giving back. So I started volunteering with this global startup lab, and with my previous startup experience, it was exciting to get along with complementary team. And I joined another few folks out of CSAIL, the lab, Computer Science Artificial Intelligence lab, post my graduation, and kind of volunteered as starting this initiative called Global Startup Lab, which is all about teaching discipline entrepreneurship in not just in different different countries, kind of taking that whole hackathon culture where come up with a problem, form a team, look for what's the technology, work on the workflow, and then come up with some sort of a minimum viable product, all working. That simulation and kind of move fast, break things, just got a instant draw. So, we did this for our company with this bunch of various side projects. And at the same time, living on the West Coast, I realized that, it's a massive place, geography very spread out. Maybe it was kind of my good point coming here, and somewhere we're a mini town. So if you want to do some meetings, you can do 4 meetings, 5 meetings, 6 meetings in a day. Unlike West Coast, you got to go from one place to the other, and you're done. And those are some of the kind of non-significant points. But I wanted to hang out in this place and not just launch the company, but I found a lot of interesting early people who helped build Zylotech here. So we were all here, and we thought, it's an interesting place and could be a good differential example of doing machine learning space back here, and going West Coast and, looking up from a complete ground up team and people. So
I want to get into some of the automated machine learning topics. So why do you think that there's a huge opportunity around automating what people see with their customers? Because I think, and we talk about the power of machine learning and what AI will be able to do in the not too distant future, but what are you seeing now on the platform, and what are the type of, impact that you're seeing from your customers?
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting one. Because, coming with a data science experience for almost a decade, and we all know that we've all heard this several times, that how data science has been overhyped, and end of the day, we end up building R&D labs and, sort of workbenches or analytic workbenches. It's very rarely we're seeing a lot of businesses, or be it marketing teams, be it, different customer analytics teams utilizing some of those insights into day-to-day sort of course correction improvements and things like that. Part of that reason is, this whole analytics or data science piece is a very ad hoc project, which means that, any analytics team kind of work on a problem, work on any ad hoc analytics projects, then look for different models, and then, data scientists work through finding out the right data, then tossing around with various, maybe, like several algorithms, and then coming up with the best one. And by the time there's new data, and then the business changes, the data changes, it's always a constant piece. These days, talent has always been scared, and need has ever been more. And it's more than, sometimes talent, with a lot of young people who's kind of available, who has played around with logistic regressions. Sometimes it's a combination of the domain knowledge and the problems you're solving, the architectic skill to design skill, and then programming skill. And these kind of multicultural, multi-skill set has to work in a language where they all understand each other, has never been so challenging. So we thought, why don't we think through certain industries? Think of insurance, think of retail, and think of what does customer analytics means? Would you care about a model like an LTV? Would you care about cross-selling, upselling? Would you care about, think of all that. So we brought in a lot of domain knowledge by each industry, by thinking through, if I had to do everything in the customer analytics space, and if I'm an insurance industry, what would that be? So we built, thinking from there. And then we thought of what's an ideal data set? There's none, but then we created industry, an ideal schemas and thinking and imagination when thinking of product thinking. And from there, we thought if we could do automated feature engineering and with embedded models, these models are kind of self-optimized with, sort of what we call ourselves is we crack the code there a little bit in terms of embedded models, which are self-learning and kind of reinforced learning piece in there. And then anytime you sort of go into an account, you implement, you get the data, you got the feature engineering, you got the embedded models all working in tandem, and it's constantly evolving. So even if you have limited data, you could start off, as more comes in, there's always an accommodation. So not just about Zylotech, but, off lately we've seen AutoML, like Google came up with this term, and we were using it before that, by the way. But there's a significant need of some bit of automation in this pipe. Like people have been just automating the model building part, but we've been thinking this all through from data sourcing to unification to integration, then all the way to models and then output. I feel we looked up customer analytics as a problem. Like people who's been seeing this as a recurring thing, as an ongoing thing for solving different problems, like marketing has all the problems, where they call about how do I sell more? How do I personalize more? How do I make my customer experience more contextual? This is like a permanent need. This is an ongoing need. This is what they've been doing, and they want to improve this day in and out. Well, there could be other things where this could be applied. This could be applied in clinical trial. This could be applied in, supply chain. This could be applied in various different industry. It's all about you have to figure out what that, sort of models would be, what those features could be, how would they come, and, automate that whole pie. So does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, let's take a step back too, because I think to the origins of AutoML that you were talking about there, like how would you define AutoML, and kind of when did you were saying that Google came out with or started talking about it recently, and you all were talking about it a little bit before, but for our listeners who don't know, what is AutoML?
Yeah, so we had this natural, what we were looking at is that if you're building a machine learning model, could you build an automated workflow to build a machine learning model in the customer analytics space? So that's how when we started, we were positioning this. So we say, look, it's automated machine learning powered customer analytics. So that was our sort of narrative. But seeing Google and some of the other company and Data Robot and some of these, what they kind of say this that, look, you don't have to like code a brand new algorithm. Like there's a library exists, and all that you have to find is, find the right data, features, tune them, and use our sort of, pre-built models, kind of, algorithms, which gives you the best output, whatever is the best works out for solving the next problem. But again, their version of AutoML still requires, I understand that you could be a citizen scientist and you could be a business user who can do a little bit of easiness. You're not like hard coding the algorithm and those kind of pieces being automated. But you still need to have that kind of knowledge of what data, what feature, how much tuning, and a lot of those things. Before, like how would you imagine a school grad or maybe a marketer, you say, well, we got to solve this problem of, cross-selling. What would you do? So you'll go to a library like Google or maybe Data Robot and some of the others and look for what's the pre-built, algorithms, and then you look for the data, and then you'll bring that data into them, look for the best output, and then you deploy some of those things. So it's still very DIY, but part of that model building is kind of automated. Unlike our piece, which we thought, look, since it's customer analytics, so the universe of the model is being defined, there are multiple of them, and they have multiple algorithms, all of that. And there is this whole ETL pipe with data unification and, data standardization, whole those kind of thing, and ID resolution. So every unique customer is being assigned a unique ID, so it tags back, and those features associated to those IDs, and those features are automated, feature engineered to these embedded model. So that whole ETL or kind of data and decision pipe is in motion, is what we call it as the whole automated machine learning process, which could, you can take apart and say this is automated too. Well, both is good.
So what are some examples of folks that you've worked with where they have kind of some of these, and I think a lot of the technology leaders that are listening are thinking about, obviously they have database, they have cloud, they have third party, they have all these different things. This idea of how do we take insights from all of that? How do we enrich that data, and how do we actually use it, in Salesforce or in wherever to be able to, leverage it? What are some of those things from the customers that you're working with that are able to see some of those, see their data or enrich it in some way, and then ultimately be able to take action?
Right. This is a great question, because most of our customers are large enterprise and they have a lot of data science internal talent.
Yeah. So because that was one of the things that you had mentioned in the past, was basically like, essentially there's a lot of the time that data scientists, here you go. The majority of data scientists only spend 20% of their time working on data analysis. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So you're spot on. So what we meant and what we've seen with some of our clients is, well, they have these internal team, and, you definitely need to build an R&D culture or data culture and analytics, and analyze and consume every data point so that you can improve your business. But like I said before, these are more like projects, and sometimes there are, like finding out what's working, what's not, and more descriptive, sometimes predictive, but not so much prescriptive, because you need a constant flow of data, constant flow of insights, do hundreds of A/B testing or permutation combination, because the nature of the data flow, the way the end customer data is getting generated and the way it is being analyzed and consumed, is a huge disconnect. So what we're seeing with some of our clients is, well, they're doing all the projects and analytic projects, and they have R&D team, and they're doing the core part internally, and we call them as defensive strategy, but they're also working with somebody like us for their offensive strategy to help their business leader have an impact or an ROI within 2 quarters, 3 quarters. They want to make sure that their customer experience, when a customer comes on the website, they get a very contextual offer. Those projects, those contextual offer evolves, and they get updated as the behavior data from the back end is changing, or somebody does something and it's constantly evolving. So that persistent ID and that persistent, behavioral change by each customer ID is kind of very interesting, complementary. And in some cases, in some clients, the internal data science team actually helped us validate that part, because, you have to understand that some business think, well, this I've been listening for so many years. Maybe my data science team does this. And then they realize, well, it's not the data science fault, it's the data fault. And sometimes you don't have this, you don't have that, but it's not really happening. Well, the internal data science team sometimes champion us, because then they love the fact that in this whole long data decision pipe, if they've done this in a fully flawless automation, then they can also focus on some of the other things using some of our insights, which are more deployable, because there's so much business can do if they're getting that all feed in, So it works out pretty well. And we've seen this in a few clients, like one of our clients, apparently most of them are pretty innovative, but we also have some clients who never had an internal data science team, like zero. And they kept thinking that, well, if I want to do the customer personalization or build, analytic practice, I probably had to start with hiring like 20 PhDs or building up this analytic bench, but it's constantly changing. So we just won two accounts, very large, Midwest, one large grocery company and the other consumer brand, who never had internal data science team. And they just had like two people in data science, but they're going with us. But we've got two largest tech companies over our client where they had internal data science team of 100 plus people pursuing a whole bunch of things, and they use our kind of feed, and they also innovate further in product development, some of the internal R&D projects. But then the sales and marketing uses us within their CRM and marketing automation or whatever the MarTech tool they've been working on. So we've seen different scenarios, different clients, but that's how I like to summarize that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, do you see this getting more complex as we go forward, with hybrid cloud and how many different types of, especially like, you've talked about the MarTech stack, and obviously, whether it's any type of, technology stack, you're having individual business units that have a ton of different types of technologies. It seems like this is going to get more confusing before it gets better.
Yeah, no, you're so right. And we see this happening every now and then. I mean, if you look at this whole kind of hype thing, and I usually articulate this as 3Ds, the D for data management, then decision management, then delivery management. So when delivery management is all about the MarTech and AdTech and the BI and the presentational layer of what's the call to action to be taken. And, there's so much innovation happening there. And it started like ever since from there because, business users understand what they see. They're more visual. So there's so much investment happen around top of the sort of delivery layer and things like that. But then people start realizing, well, all these KPIs and all these dashboards doesn't mean a lot because, it's not leveraging all my data. So I don't trust these KPIs. And then people start focusing a lot on the second D, which is decision, and then they are a bunch of data scientists all this while, and they've been sitting and, analytic work been started, and then they realize, well, they don't have data. So people have made disproportionate amount of investment in the decisions even before having the right data. And then this came in like, we need data. So got to invest on data management and big data and data engineering bandwidth. It's only like off lately they've been happening so much in the data. And then, earlier data started with like, data prep. So I want my business user to be the data prep provider and, things like that. So it's constantly evolving situation. Sometimes it's data management, sometimes decision, sometimes delivery management. In some companies, one of those things are more stronger than the other. And then they end up start digging into one thing and then they realize, oh, wait, we don't have that enough and we got to invest in that. Constantly within these Ds, there are like a lot of subcategories keep popping up and, within decision, like you said, well, we need a machine learning platform. Then you realize, oh, wait a minute, maybe now it's AutoML. And then within data management, you're like, I want to invest in MDM, that'll be like single source of truth. And then suddenly you said, no, wait a minute. MDM is for everything. Well, CDP is for customer data. So you're so right. It could be pretty confusing with people and because it's constantly evolving. So one need to really see between these 3Ds and see what's really required, what's the problem they're solving, most immediately versus long term, and then make those choices with the right combination of people, tools, and processes. But the exciting news is it's all getting more and more easier. Well, it's getting complemented with the categories. But if you see the amount of education, and CDP is a great example. I've seen people who heard the word CDP like 1.5 years back, and now they're like pro. And all that they're pro is because, all these analyst firms and customer and webinars and the resources tool is so much, there's so much education. Like CDP is a great example of how education has come up a long way. I know there's still a lot of frenziness and everyone is just calling something and it could be confusing. You're right. But, we're seeing a lot of these champions at the customer end are more nowadays younger folks who had been a hands-on MarTech user and who does their own research. So at one hand, it's getting complicated, but on the other hand, the customer awareness is unprecedented. The whole education bit is unprecedented. So,
all right, let's get into some lightning round questions. These questions are fast and easy, just like the Lightning platform from Salesforce. You can go to salesforce.com/build mobile apps to learn more about building apps on the world's #1 CRM lightning fast. Just like these questions are about to be. Are you ready, Abhi?
Yes.
Number 1, what app are you using on your phone that is the most fun?
Google Maps.
What is your favorite vacation spot?
Well, has to be in a Caribbean island. I always get confused between which one, but yeah.
How about favorite use of chatbots that you've seen recently?
I think Drift is amazing. We use that. It's great.
Oh, nice. What about a favorite book or podcast that you've read or listened to recently?
Well, the one I'm talking to is definitely one of the best. So I'm fascinated to be here. That was an easy one for me.
Appreciate it. Favorite vacation spot not vacation, but one day getaway spot around the Boston area?
Yeah, it is Maine. So love to go for hiking sometime, 2-hour drive. It's fascinating.
Thing you're most excited about going forward for technology?
I think the emergence of AI and the way, my mom, my grandma, somebody can use and kind of appreciate when they talk to Google and then talk to some of the Siri and, these AI stuff, kind of chatbot and kind of voice modulation, the whole quality is so exciting. I think we're just halfway through and maybe there's much more coming in. So we're really excited about the AI emergence.
As a current CEO, but also a former chief technologist, what would be your best advice for a first-time CTO or CIO?
Yeah, great point. So I feel that I wouldn't say all the, you need to be well-read and well-fed and have the right team, right people, and be awesome. I feel today we live in such a noisy world where all that you got to manage is, yourself first. So self-awareness is one of the most critical advice I feel like that helped me, that helped a lot of my peers, it'll help some of the greatest guys I've worked with in the technology space. So really excited about that.
What question do you never get asked that you wish you were asked more often?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Well, let me think. I think nobody asks, most of the time that, why are you doing this? Well, sometimes they're like, oh, is it because of that big exit or is it that because of innovation? Like, why are you doing this? Like, why? Like, I understand the start point and I understand the passion and things, but that's pretty fascinating. But maybe it's just a way of putting this through. But I just felt like, having that question every year is interesting. It's not just a one-time question like, why are you doing this? But why are you doing this now? Why? Life changes, and things happen. So
I love it. Well, this has been an awesome time having you hang out. And I need to hear before you go, what is the why for your team of why you're so excited to get up every day and work on Zylotech?
Yeah, no, you might have heard this thing viral, a Japanese ikigai movement where, well, it's one thing you're making an impact in the world, you're really passionate about, you get paid well, you have some fun. It's not the boring stuff, but, I kind of personally believe in this ikigai thing, where you have this combination of these 3-4 things, and then if the common piece of vector there is what makes you wake up every morning and be supercharged and get back to work, and let's go build this. Let's change the world.
I love it. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Any final things? Anything to plug?
No, I'm glad we had this, and thank you so much for inviting me. I thank you for your time, and it was really fun. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for hanging out.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks again to our friends at Salesforce. Did you know Salesforce isn't just for sales? Using Salesforce as an employee experience platform helps make every employee across your organization more productive thanks to a common mobile-first platform for getting work done faster. Find out more at salesforce.com/employee experience.